Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Liberty, watching the stars drift past through the main view screen. His coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but he didn't mind. Space was peaceful today, and after 3 months of surveying empty star systems, peaceful was exactly what he needed. The Liberty was not a big ship by human standards. She carried only 43 crew members and was built for exploration, not fighting. Her hull was gray and practical, with no fancy decorations or bright colors. The bridge was small and cramped, with screens and buttons covering every surface. Everything had a purpose, and nothing was there just to look good. "Captain," called Lisa Parker from the navigation station. She was young, maybe 25, with short brown hair and sharp eyes. "I'm picking up something strange on the long-range sensors." Jake set down his cold coffee and walked over to look at her screen. "What kind of strange?" "Big ships, sir. Really big, and they're heading straight for us." Chief Engineer Danny Rodriguez looked up from his console. He was a stocky man with graying hair and oil stains on his uniform. "How big are we talking about?" Lisa checked her readings again. "The largest one is about 10 kilometers long. The others are smaller, but still huge compared to us." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The Liberty was only 300 meters long. Whatever was coming toward them was massive. "Any idea who they are?" "No, sir. The computer doesn't recognize their ship designs. They're not from any human colony or Earth fleet." Amy Foster, the communications officer, suddenly straightened in her chair. She was a thin woman with red hair pulled back in a tight bun. "Captain, I'm receiving a transmission. It's coming from the big ship. Put it through." The main screen flickered and changed. Instead of stars, they now saw the inside of what looked like a palace. Golden walls stretched up to a high ceiling covered in strange symbols. Tall pillars supported the roof, and everything seemed to glow with a soft, warm light. It was beautiful, but also somehow frightening. In the center of the room stood a figure that was clearly not human. It was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large, dark eyes. It wore a flowing robe covered in metals and jewels. Behind it stood rows of similar beings, all wearing fancy uniforms and serious expressions. The alien opened its mouth and spoke. Its voice was deep and echoing, like someone talking in a cathedral. But the words that came out were in perfect English, thanks to the translation system. "Greetings, primitive vessel. I am Admiral Zephyx, Supreme Commander of the Eternal Galactic, Empire's third battle fleet, keeper of the sacred flame of conquest, and protector of the divine order of the stars." Danny Rodriguez let out a small snort of laughter. Lisa Parker pressed her lips together, trying not to smile. Even Jake had to bite his tongue to keep from grinning. The alien continued, apparently not noticing their reactions. "You have entered the sacred territory of the Eternal Galactic Empire, mightiest force in the galaxy, ruler of 10,000 worlds, master of countless species, and bearer of the divine right to govern all life among the stars." Amy Foster's shoulders began to shake. She turned away from her console, pretending to check something important, but Jake could see she was trying not to laugh. "By the ancient laws of the Empire, written in the blood of our enemies and carved in the bones of defeated worlds, you are hereby commanded to surrender your vessel immediately. You will kneel before the infinite wisdom of the Galactic Empire and accept your fate as servants of the divine order." At this point, Danny Rodriguez could not hold back anymore. He let out a loud chuckle, which he quickly tried to cover by coughing. But the damage was done. Lisa Parker started giggling, and within seconds, half the bridge crew was struggling to contain their laughter. Admiral Zephyx's large eyes narrowed. "Do you dare mock the sacred words of the Empire?" Jake tried to pull himself together. As captain, he needed to handle this diplomatically. But the alien's serious tone and flowery language made it almost impossible to take him seriously. "I apologize, Admiral," Jake said, fighting to keep his voice steady. "We don't mean any disrespect. It's just that your way of speaking is very different from ours." "Different?" The alien's voice rose to what sounded like outrage. "The sacred language of the Empire has been perfected over thousands of years. It carries the weight of destiny and the power of the gods themselves. Danny Rodriguez made a choking sound. Lisa Parker had to turn completely around to hide her face. Even the normally serious Amy Foster was biting her lip to keep from bursting out laughing. Your primitive species shall bow to our supreme technological superiority, Admiral Zephyx continued, his voice getting louder and more dramatic. Our ships are marvels of engineering, blessed by the cosmic forces and empowered by the eternal flame of conquest. Your pathetic vessel cannot hope to match our divine weapons. Divine weapons? Jake repeated, and this time he couldn't keep the smile out of his voice. Yes, the alien said proudly. The thunder of the gods, the lightning of justice, the sword of eternal punishment. Each one capable of destroying worlds, each one a testament to the Empire's righteous power. The entire bridge crew was now struggling not to laugh out loud. The alien's dramatic speech, combined with his serious expression and fancy costume, was like watching a very serious actor performing in a children's play. Admiral, Jake said, trying to be diplomatic, perhaps we could discuss this more calmly. We're just explorers. We don't want any trouble. Trouble? Admiral Zephyx's voice echoed through the bridge. You speak of trouble when you face the might of the eternal galactic empire? We have conquered civilizations that span galaxies. We have brought order to chaos and light to darkness. We are the masters of space and time itself. Lisa Parker let out a snort of laughter that she quickly tried to cover with a cough. Amy Foster was now openly grinning. Danny Rodriguez was shaking his head in disbelief. You find our words amusing? The alien asked, his voice growing cold. Well, Jake said, still trying to be polite, it's just that where we come from, people don't usually talk like that. We're more, direct. Direct? Admiral Zephyx seemed confused by the concept. Yeah, Danny Rodriguez called out from his station. Like, instead of saying, bow to our supreme technological superiority, we just say, our guns are bigger than yours. This caused several crew members to burst out laughing. Lisa Parker was now giggling openly, and Amy Foster was wiping tears from her eyes. Admiral Zephyx's face darkened. You mock the sacred traditions of the Empire. You laugh at the divine words of conquest. This is an insult that cannot be forgiven. Look, Jake said, trying to calm things down, we're not trying to insult anyone. It's just that your way of speaking is very, colorful. We're not used to it. Colorful? The alien's voice rose to a near shriek. The sacred language of the Empire is not colorful. It is divine, it is perfect, it is the voice of the gods themselves. If you say so, Jake replied, and he couldn't help but smile a little. Admiral Zephyx stared at him for a long moment. Then he raised his hand dramatically. By the ancient laws of the Empire, you have shown disrespect to the divine order. You have mocked the sacred words of conquest. You have laughed at the face of destiny itself. He paused, letting his words echo through the bridge. The human crew had finally managed to stop laughing, but they were all still smiling. Therefore, Admiral Zephyx continued, the Eternal Galactic Empire hereby declares war upon your species. You will face the full might of our divine fleet. You will feel the wrath of the gods. You will learn the price of disrespecting the sacred order. The transmission cut off, leaving the bridge in sudden silence. The crew looked at each other, then at their captain. Well, Jake said finally, that could have gone better. Danny Rodriguez started laughing again. Did he just declare war on all of humanity because we thought he was funny? I think so, Lisa Parker said. Still grinning. Amy Foster shook her head. They're going to be really disappointed when they find out we have more than one ship. Jake walked back to his captain's chair and picked up his cold coffee. Better send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we may have accidentally started a war with the Galactic Empire. How do I explain that, sir? Amy asked. Jake thought for a moment. Tell them the aliens got upset because we couldn't stop laughing at their speeches. The bridge crew started laughing again, and Jake couldn't help but join in. Whatever happened next, at least it was going to be interesting. 3 hours after Admiral Zephyx declared war on humanity, the Liberty's crew was still trying to understand what they were facing. The alien ships had moved closer, and now they could see them clearly on the main screen. "Would you look at that?" said Lieutenant Kevin Brooks, the ship's tactical officer. He was a young man with blonde hair and a habit of saying exactly what he thought. "They look like someone took a bunch of cathedrals and stuck rocket engines on them." He was not wrong. The Empire's ships were covered in tall spires and curved arches. Golden decorations covered their hulls, and bright lights outlined every surface. The largest ship, Admiral Zefix's flagship, had what looked like actual stained glass windows along its sides. "Why would anyone put stained glass on a warship?" asked Lisa Parker, staring at the screen in amazement. "Maybe they want to look pretty while they blow things up," Danny Rodriguez suggested from his engineering station. Captain Jake Morrison studied the enemy formation through his binoculars. The Empire ships were arranged in a perfect diamond pattern, with the flagship in the center and smaller vessels surrounding it. It looked impressive, but Jake had studied enough military history to know that pretty formations were usually not very practical. "Amy, any word from Earth Command?" he asked. Amy Foster checked her communications panel. "Yes, sir. Admiral Clark sends his regards and says the Fourth Fleet is on its way. They should be here in 6 hours. 6 hours, Jake repeated. "Think we can stay out of trouble that long?" Before anyone could answer, Admiral Zefix's voice boomed through the bridge speakers again. "Attention, primitive vessel. You will now witness the sacred ritual of battle preparation. Behold the divine ceremony of the eternal Galactic Empire." The main screen showed the inside of the alien flagship again. This time, hundreds of Empire soldiers were marching in perfect lines across a huge chamber. They wore elaborate armor covered in symbols and carried weapons that looked more like decorative staffs than actual guns. "Are they having a parade?" Kevin Brooks asked. "I think so," Jake replied. Watching the aliens march back and forth in complex patterns, the ceremony went on for 20 minutes. The alien soldiers marched, saluted, and chanted in their own language. Officers in fancy uniforms gave speeches about honor and glory. Musicians played dramatic music on instruments that looked like a cross between trumpets and lightning bolts. "How long is this going to take?" Danny Rodriguez asked, checking his watch. "The sacred ritual of battle preparation requires exactly 1 hour and 37 minutes, Admiral Zefix announced, as if he had heard the question. "During this time, we will purify our weapons, bless our shields, and prepare our souls for glorious combat." The human crew looked at each other in disbelief. "They're telling us exactly how long they'll take to get ready for battle?" Lisa Parker asked. "Apparently," Jake said. "Amy, record everything. Earth Command is going to want to see this." The ceremony continued. The aliens performed ritual dances around their weapons. They burned incense and chanted prayers. Officers took turns making speeches about the greatness of the Empire and the sacred duty of conquest. "This is like watching a really long church service," Kevin Brooks observed. "Except the church wants to blow us up afterward." Danny Rodriguez added, 30 minutes into the ceremony, something interesting happened. The Empire ships began to move into attack formation, but they did it very slowly and in a specific pattern. Each ship had to wait for the one in front of it to reach a certain position before it could move. "They're telegraphing their entire battle plan," Kevin Brooks said, studying his tactical display. "Look at this. Ship A moves to position 1. Then Ship B moves to position 2, then Ship C moves to position 3. It's like they're following a script." "Maybe they are," Jake said. "Amy, can you analyze their movement pattern?" Amy Foster worked at her console for a few minutes. "Yes, sir. Based on their current positions and speed, I can predict exactly where each ship will be in the next hour." "Can you predict where they'll fire their weapons?" "I think so. They seem to be lining up for a classic pincer movement. The small ships will try to surround us while the big ship attacks from the front." Jake nodded. "Kevin, can we avoid their attack if we know exactly where they're going to be?" "Easily, sir. Their formation is so predictable that we could plot a course around them with our eyes closed." The ceremony on the Empire flagship reached its climax. Admiral Zefix stood before a massive altar covered in glowing crystals and began to chant in a deep, echoing voice. The other aliens joined in, creating a sound like a choir of very serious ghosts. "By the sacred flame of conquest, we purify our weapons," Admiral Zephyx intoned. "By the eternal light of the Empire, we strengthen our shields," the crowd responded. "By the divine will of the gods, we prepare for glorious battle. We prepare for glorious battle." "This is really happening," Lisa Parker said, shaking her head. "They're actually having a religious ceremony before they attack us." "At least they're taking their time," Danny Rodriguez said. "Gives us a chance to figure out what to do." The ceremony finally ended after exactly 1 hour and 37 minutes, just as Admiral Zephyx had promised. The Empire ships began to move into their final attack positions, still following their predictable pattern. "All ships, prepare for the sacred dance of battle," Admiral Zephyx announced. "We will now demonstrate the ancient art of honorable combat." "Sacred dance of battle?" Kevin Brooks repeated. "What is this, a ballet?" As if to answer his question, the Empire ships began to move in a series of elaborate maneuvers. They spun and twisted through space, their lights flashing in complex patterns. It was actually quite beautiful to watch, but it was also completely impractical. "They're more worried about looking good than fighting effectively," Jake observed. "Should we do something, sir?" Kevin asked. "They're getting pretty close. Not yet. Let's see what they do next." The Empire ships completed their dance and lined up for the actual attack. But instead of firing immediately, they began another ceremony. This time, each ship took turns announcing its name and the glorious deeds of its crew. "I am the divine sword of justice," announced the captain of one ship. "I have conquered 17 worlds and brought the light of the Empire to the darkness of space." "I am the sacred thunder of righteousness," declared another captain. "I have destroyed 39 enemy vessels and claimed victory in the name of the gods." This went on for another 20 minutes, as each ship captain bragged about their achievements. The human crew listened in amazement. "They're giving us their complete battle history," Amy Foster said, "including their weaknesses and the tactics they used in previous fights. Are they trying to help us?" Lisa Parker asked. "I don't think they realize what they're doing," Jake said. "This is probably just how they always fight." Finally, the Empire ships finished their speeches and prepared to attack. But even then, they didn't just start shooting. Instead, Admiral Zephyx issued a formal challenge. "Primitive vessel, you will now face the righteous fury of the eternal Galactic Empire. You accept the terms of honorable combat?" Jake looked around the bridge. His crew was staring at him expectantly. "What terms?" he asked. "The ancient terms of battle," Admiral Zephyx replied. "Single combat between champions, followed by fleet engagement according to the sacred rules of war." "What are the sacred rules of war?" Jake asked. "Each side takes turns attacking. The defending side must remain stationary while the attacking side fires all weapons. Then the roles reverse. This continues until one side is destroyed or surrenders." The bridge fell silent. The human crew stared at the screen in disbelief. "They want us to take turns shooting at each other?" Kevin Brooks asked. "Like a duel with spaceships," Danny Rodriguez said. "That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard," Lisa Parker added. Jake thought for a moment. "The Empire's rules would put the Liberty at a huge disadvantage. Their ships were much larger and more heavily armed. But they were also slow and predictable." "Admiral Zephyx," Jake said finally, "we appreciate the offer, but we humans have our own rules of combat." "What rules are those?" the alien asked. "We shoot first and ask questions later." With that, Jake turned to his tactical officer. "Kevin, target their weapon systems. Fire when ready." The Liberty's weapons were small compared to the Empire's massive guns, but they were fast and accurate. Before Admiral Zephyx could respond, 3 of his ships had lost their main weapons. "That was very dishonorable," Admiral Zephyx said, sounding more confused than angry. "Maybe," Jake replied, "but it was also very effective." The real battle was about to begin. The news of Admiral Zephyx's defeat spread through the Galactic Empire like wildfire. On the capital world of Zentros Prime, the High Council of the Empire gathered in emergency session. The council chamber was enormous, with golden walls that stretched up into darkness and seats. Arranged in perfect circles around a central platform, Fleet Admiral Korath stood at the center of the chamber, his tall frame draped in a robe covered with medals from 1,000 victories. His pale blue skin was darker than most of his species, and his large black eyes held the cold stare of someone who had never been challenged. "Honorable members of the High Council," Korath began, his voice echoing through the chamber, "we face a crisis unlike any in the history of our glorious empire. A primitive species has dared to mock our sacred traditions and defeat our forces through dishonorable means." The council members murmured among themselves. These were the most powerful beings in the empire, rulers of entire star systems and commanders of vast fleets. They wore elaborate robes and carried staffs of office that glowed with inner light. "Tell us of these humans," demanded Supreme Commander Vorthak. Keeper of the sacred battle flame, he was an ancient alien whose skin was almost white with age. "What manner of creatures are they?" "They are small and weak," Korath replied with disgust. "Their ships are tiny and poorly decorated. They have no sense of honor or proper military conduct. They attack without warning and show no respect for the ancient ways of war." "No respect for the ancient ways?" gasped General Thyman, guardian of the stellar wains. "How is such a thing possible?" "They laugh at our sacred ceremonies," Korath continued. "They mock our divine speeches. They refuse to follow the proper rules of combat." Admiral Zefix reports that they actually giggled during his declaration of war. The council chamber erupted in shocked gasps and angry muttering. Several council members stood up, their robes flowing dramatically as they gestured in outrage. "This cannot be allowed," declared Minister Xander, protector of the divine order. "The sacred traditions of the empire must be respected by all species. If we allow these humans to mock our ways, other primitive races might follow their example." "Indeed," agreed Commander Nexus, keeper of the eternal flame. "We must send a massive fleet to crush these insolent creatures and show the galaxy that the Empire will not tolerate such disrespect." Fleet Admiral Korath nodded gravely. "I volunteer to lead this mission personally. I will take the First Imperial battle fleet and teach these humans the proper way to conduct war. How many ships will you need?" asked Supreme Commander Vorthak. 500 of our finest vessels," Korath replied, "including the sacred dreadnought Cosmic Dominator. We will show these humans what true military power looks like." Meanwhile, on Earth, the situation was being discussed in much simpler terms. Defense Minister Pete Johnson sat in his office reading Captain Morrison's report for the third time. He was a middle-aged man with gray hair and a habit of drinking too much coffee when he was stressed. "So let me get this straight," he said to Admiral Carol Wright, who sat across from his desk. "Our people accidentally started a war with a galactic empire because they couldn't stop laughing at their speeches?" Admiral Wright was a tough woman in her 50s, who had worked her way up through the ranks of the Earth Defense Force. She had seen many strange things in her career, but this was definitely the strangest. "That's about the size of it," she replied. "According to Morrison's report, these aliens take their ceremonies very seriously. They seem to think our laughter was deliberate mockery." "And they declared war on all of humanity because of it?" "Apparently. They also seem to think we're a primitive species with inferior technology." Pete Johnson set down the report and rubbed his temples. "Are we? Primitive?" Admiral Wright almost smiled. "Their ships are bigger than ours, but they're also slower and less maneuverable. They follow predictable attack patterns and announce their battle plans in advance. From a tactical standpoint, they're sitting ducks. So we can beat them? If Morrison's report is accurate, we should be able to handle whatever they send at us. The problem is, we don't know how many ships they have or how far their empire extends." Intelligence Officer Tony Garcia knocked on the door and entered the office. He was a young man with dark hair and sharp eyes who specialized in analyzing alien technology and behavior. "Sir, we've intercepted some of their communications," he reported. "It looks like they're sending a much larger fleet to deal with us." "How large?" Admiral Wright asked. About 500 ships led by someone called Fleet Admiral Korath. He's apparently one of their top commanders. Defense Minister Johnson felt his stress level rise. 500 ships? How many do we have in that sector? The Fourth Fleet should reach Captain Morrison's position in about 4 hours, Admiral Wright replied. That's 25 ships total, 25 against 500. Johnson did some quick math in his head. That doesn't sound good. It might not be as bad as it sounds, Tony Garcia said. Based on what we've learned about their tactics, they'll probably spend several hours performing ceremonies before they attack. That gives us time to position our ships and plan our strategy. Admiral Wright stood up. I think we need to see this for ourselves. Pete, I'm going to take the command ship out there and observe these aliens firsthand. Is that wise? Johnson asked. We need to understand what we're dealing with. If there really is a galactic empire out there, this might just be the beginning. Back in space, Captain Morrison was having his own problems. The Fourth Fleet had arrived as promised, but their commander was not happy about the situation. So, you started a war by laughing at them? Asked Captain Rick Thompson, commander of the USS Freedom. He was a serious man in his 40s who believed in following proper military protocol. We didn't start anything, Morrison replied over the communications channel. They declared war on us because we found their speeches funny. And now they're sending 500 ships to destroy us? That's what our intelligence suggests. Captain Thompson was quiet for a moment. Morrison, do you realize what you've done? You may have doomed humanity by insulting some alien emperor. I don't think so, Morrison said. These aliens are all ceremony and no substance. They're more interested in looking impressive than actually fighting effectively. 500 ships is still 500 ships. Maybe, but I have an idea. 2 days later, Fleet Admiral Korath arrived in the system with his massive fleet. The ships spread out in a perfect formation that looked like a giant flower blooming in space. Each vessel was a work of art, covered in decorations and glowing with inner light. On the bridge of the Cosmic Dominator, Korath studied the human ships through his viewing screen. There were now 25 of them, arranged in a loose formation. That looked almost random compared to the Empire's perfect order. Look at them, he said to his second-in-command, Captain Vex. They have no sense of proper military formation. Their ships are small and ugly. This will be over quickly. Captain Vex was younger than most Empire officers, and he had been studying the humans' previous battle with Admiral Zephix. Something about their tactics bothered him, but he couldn't quite put his finger on what it was. Sir, he said carefully, perhaps we should observe them more closely before we attack. Their methods seem very different from ours. Different? Korath laughed. They are primitive barbarians. We will crush them with the ancient tactics that have served the Empire for thousands of years. Of course, sir. Shall I begin the pre-battle ceremonies? Yes, full ritual preparation. I want these humans to understand the majesty of the Empire before we destroy them. As the Empire fleet began its elaborate ceremonies, the human ships moved into new positions. They spread out in a wide arc, using asteroids and debris to hide their movements. It was a simple tactic, but effective. Captain Morrison watched the alien preparations with growing amusement. They're doing it again, he said to his crew. 2 hours of ceremonies before they attack. Should we do something? Asked Kevin Brooks. Not yet. Let them finish their show first. The Empire's ceremonies were even more elaborate this time. 500 ships performed a synchronized dance through space, their lights flashing in complex patterns. It was beautiful to watch, but it also made them easy targets. Tony, are you getting all this? Morrison asked his communications officer. Yes, sir. Earth Command is going to love this. When the ceremonies finally ended, Fleet Admiral Korath opened a channel to the human fleet. Primitive vessels, you face the full might of the eternal galactic empire. Surrender now, and we will grant you a quick death. Morrison replied in his most polite voice. That's very kind of you, Admiral, but we'll have to decline. We're not really the surrendering type. Then you will face the consequences of your arrogance. I'm sure we will, but first I have a question. What question? Do you always take this long to get ready for battle? The question seemed to confuse Korath. The sacred rituals must be performed correctly. They have been perfected over thousands of years, I see. And do you always tell your enemies exactly what you're going to do before you do it? Of course. Honor demands that we fight according to the ancient rules. Morrison looked around his bridge at his grinning crew. Well, that's very sporting of you. Unfortunately, we don't have any ancient rules. Fleet Admiral Korath stood on the bridge of the Cosmic Dominator, watching his perfect formation of 500 ships spread across space like a deadly flower. Each vessel held its position exactly, waiting for his command to begin the final assault on the small human fleet. "Sir," reported Captain Vex from his position at the tactical station, "all ships are ready for the final phase of battle preparation." "Excellent," Korath replied, his voice filled with pride. "Begin the ceremony of the ultimate weapon." "Captain." Morrison watched from the bridge of the USS Liberty as the Empire's ships began to move again. But this time, something was different. The largest ship, a massive vessel that dwarfed all the others, moved to the center of the formation. "What are they doing now?" asked Lisa Parker, studying her sensor readings. "I'm not sure," Morrison replied. "But that big ship is powering up something. The energy readings are off the charts." Kevin Brooks looked up from his tactical console with a worried expression. "Captain, I think they're charging some kind of super weapon." On the Empire flagship, Fleet Admiral Korath began the most sacred ceremony in the Imperial military. He stood before a massive altar covered in glowing crystals, while hundreds of officers formed perfect circles around him. "Behold," Korath announced, his voice echoing through the ship's communication system so all 500 vessels could hear. "We shall now awaken the Cosmic Annihilator, most sacred weapon of the Empire. Destroyer of worlds, bringer of divine justice." The human crews across the fleet listened to this announcement with growing amazement. "Did he just tell us the name of their secret weapon?" asked Captain Rick Thompson from the USS Freedom. "I think he did," Morrison replied. "And he's broadcasting it to everyone in the system. The Cosmic Annihilator requires the sacred ritual of awakening," Korath continued, completely unaware that he was giving the humans valuable intelligence. "This most holy ceremony will take exactly 2 hours to complete." Danny Rodriguez nearly fell out of his chair laughing. 2 hours? They're giving us a 2-hour warning before they fire their ultimate weapon? "This is getting ridiculous," said Amy Foster, shaking her head in disbelief. The ceremony began with the Empire's most elaborate ritual yet. Thousands of aliens across the fleet started chanting in unison, their voices creating a deep, echoing sound that traveled through space. The Cosmic Dominator began to glow with a bright golden light that pulsed in time with the chanting. "By the sacred fire of creation, we awaken the divine destroyer," the aliens chanted. "By the eternal light of the Empire, we call forth the cosmic judgment. By the will of the gods themselves, we prepare the ultimate annihilation." Captain Morrison turned to his communications officer. "Amy, patch me through to all ships in the fleet. Channel open, sir." "All human vessels, this is Captain Morrison. As you can see, our friends are preparing to fire their ultimate weapon at us. The good news is, they've kindly given us 2 hours to figure out what to do about it." Laughter crackled through the communication channels as the other ship captains responded. "Any suggestions?" asked Captain Helen Martinez from the USS Independence. "Actually, yes," Morrison replied. "I've been studying their patterns, and I think I know exactly what they're going to do." For the next hour, the Empire continued their ceremony while the human ships quietly repositioned themselves. The aliens were so focused on their ritual that they didn't notice the humans moving around the system, using asteroids and space debris to hide their true positions. "The sacred crystals are aligned," announced one of Korath's officers. "The divine circuits are energized," reported another. "The cosmic targeting system is calibrated and ready." Morrison listened to these reports with growing amusement. The Empire was not only telling them how long the weapon would take to charge, but also giving them a step-by-step progress report. "Kevin," Morrison said to his tactical officer, Based on their announcements, can you figure out exactly when and where they're going to fire? Kevin Brooks had been working on this problem for the past hour. Yes, sir. They're targeting the coordinates where our fleet was positioned when they started the ceremony. The weapon will fire in exactly 53 minutes. And we're not going to be there when it fires? Not even close, sir. We'll be about 10,000 kilometers away, hiding behind that large asteroid. The ceremony reached its halfway point. Fleet Admiral Korath raised his arms dramatically as the cosmic annihilator continued to charge. The weapon was housed in the front section of his flagship, and it now glowed so brightly that it could be seen from the other side of the system. Witness the power of the Empire, Korath declared. No force in the galaxy can stand against the divine might of the cosmic annihilator. Captain Vex watched the charging process with growing unease. He had been studying the human ships, and something bothered him about their behavior. They had moved away from their original positions, but they were doing it slowly and quietly, as if they didn't want to be noticed. Sir, he said carefully to Admiral Korath, perhaps we should check the current position of the enemy ships before we fire. Nonsense, Korath replied without looking away from the ceremony. The targeting was set at the beginning of the ritual. To change it now would disrupt the sacred process. But, sir, the humans might have moved. The coordinates are blessed by the gods themselves. They cannot be changed. Captain Vex wanted to argue, but he knew better than to interrupt the sacred ceremony. He could only watch and hope that the humans would stay where they were supposed to be. Meanwhile, Admiral Carroll Wright had arrived in the system aboard the command ship USS Defiance. She watched the Empire's elaborate ceremony with the same amazement that had struck every other human who encountered these aliens. How long have they been doing this? She asked Captain Morrison over the communication channel. About an hour and a half, Admiral. They should fire their ultimate weapon in about 30 minutes, and they're aiming at empty space? That's right. They targeted our original position and refused to update their targeting system because it would interfere with their ceremony. Admiral Wright was quiet for a moment, trying to process what she was seeing. Morrison, I want you to record everything. Nobody back on Earth is going to believe this. The ceremony entered its final phase. The cosmic annihilator was now fully charged and ready to fire. The weapon was so powerful that space itself seemed to bend around it, creating strange visual effects that made the stars look wavy. The moment of divine judgment has arrived, Fleet Admiral Korath announced. The cosmic annihilator will now demonstrate the price of defying the Empire. He raised his hand dramatically, preparing to give the final command. Wait, Captain Vex said desperately. Sir, the human ships are not in the target zone. Korath paused, his hand still raised. What do you mean? They've moved, sir. The targeting system is aimed at empty space. Impossible. The sacred targeting cannot be wrong. Sir, please, just look at the sensor display. For the first time since the ceremony began, Korath looked at his tactical screens. The target zone showed nothing but empty space, while the human ships were clearly visible in completely different positions. This cannot be, he said, his voice filled with confusion. The ritual was performed perfectly. The targeting was blessed by the gods. The humans moved during the ceremony, sir. But that's cheating. Captain Morrison's voice came through the communication system, sounding apologetic but amused. Sorry about that, Admiral. We're not really familiar with your rules about staying in one place while you charge your weapon. Korath stared at the screen in shock. You moved on purpose. Well, yes, it seemed like the smart thing to do. But the ceremony requires the target to remain stationary during the charging process. I'm sure it does, but nobody told us that. Fleet. Admiral Korath looked around his bridge at his confused officers. The cosmic annihilator was fully charged and ready to fire, but its target was empty space. The weapon could not be redirected without starting the entire 2-hour ceremony over again. What do we do now, sir? Asked Captain Vex. Korath stood there for a long moment, trying to understand how his perfect plan had gone wrong. Finally, he made a decision. Fire the weapon, he ordered. But sir, there's nothing to hit. Fire it anyway. At least the humans will see its power. The cosmic annihilator fired, sending a beam of pure energy across space that could have destroyed a small planet. It struck the empty coordinates with tremendous force, creating a brilliant explosion that lit up the entire system. Then it was over. The ultimate weapon had fired, the explosion had faded, and the human ships were still perfectly intact in their new positions. "That was quite a light show," Captain Morrison said politely. "Very impressive. Do you have any other tricks you'd like to demonstrate?" The silence from the Empire fleet was deafening. "I don't think they know what to do now," observed Lisa Parker. "I don't think they've ever missed before," Morrison replied. Admiral Wright's voice came through the communication channel. "All human ships prepare for counterattack. Target their weapon systems, but try not to destroy the ships completely. I think we need to have a talk with these people." The tide of battle was about to turn, and the Empire was about to learn that humans had a few tricks of their own. The silence after the cosmic annihilator's massive miss lasted for nearly 5 minutes. Across the Empire fleet, thousands of alien officers stared at their screens in confusion and disbelief. Their ultimate weapon had failed to hit anything except empty space, and none of them knew what to do next. On the bridge of the Cosmic Dominator, Fleet Admiral Korath stood frozen, his hand still raised from giving the firing command. Captain Vex watched his superior with growing concern. In all his years of service, he had never seen an Imperial Admiral look so lost. "Sir," Vex said quietly, "the weapon has fired." "What are your orders?" Korath slowly lowered his hand and looked around the bridge. His officers waited for instructions, but for the first time in his long career, he had no idea what to say. The ancient battle manuals contained no procedures for what to do when the enemy moved out of the way during a sacred ceremony. Meanwhile, the human fleet had spread out in a wide formation around the Empire ships. Admiral Wright's voice came through the communication channel to all human vessels. "All ships, target the Empire vessels' weapon systems only. We want to disable them, not destroy them. These people need help, not annihilation." Captain Morrison smiled at the order. After watching the aliens for the past few days, he had reached the same conclusion. The Empire wasn't evil, just incredibly impractical. "Kevin," he said to his tactical officer, "you heard the Admiral. Take out their guns, but be gentle about it." The human ships opened fire with surgical precision. They're smaller, more maneuverable. Vessels darted between the massive Empire ships, targeting weapon systems and shield generators. The aliens were so shocked by their superweapons failure that many of them didn't even return fire. Within 30 minutes, half the Empire fleet was defenseless. Their beautiful ships remained intact, but their weapons were offline and their shields were down. The humans had accomplished in 30 minutes what should have taken hours of conventional battle. Captain Vex watched the systematic destruction of his fleet's combat capability with a mixture of admiration and despair. The humans moved like nothing he had ever seen before, coordinating their attacks without elaborate ceremonies or formal battle protocols. They just identified targets and shot them. "Sir," he said to Admiral Korath, "we need to do something. Our ships are being disabled one by one." Korath finally seemed to wake up from his shock. "Signal all ships to begin defensive formation pattern 7. "Sir, defensive formation pattern 7 requires 45 minutes to complete. By then, the humans will have disabled our entire fleet. Then what do you suggest?" Korath asked. His voice filled with frustration. For the first time in his career, Captain Vex spoke against military protocol. "Sir, perhaps we should ask them to stop?" "Ask them to stop?" Korath repeated, as if the words made no sense. "Yes, sir. We could request a temporary ceasefire to discuss terms." The idea of asking the enemy to pause during battle was so foreign to Imperial thinking that several bridge officers gasped in shock. But Vex pressed on. "Sir, we're clearly outmatched. Their tactics are unlike anything in our military manuals. Perhaps we should try to understand them before we lose any more ships." Korath looked around his bridge at the faces of his officers. For the first time, he saw doubt in their eyes. The sacred traditions of the Empire had failed, and everyone knew it. Very well, he said finally. Open a channel to the human commander. Captain Morrison was surprised when the communication request came through. Admiral Korath wants to talk? Apparently. Amy Foster replied, Should I put him through? Why not? This should be interesting. The main screen showed Fleet Admiral Korath's bridge again, but this time the alien leader looked very different. His proud posture was gone, and his elaborate robes seemed somehow smaller. He looked like a man whose entire worldview had just collapsed. Human commander, Korath said, his voice lacking its usual dramatic tone. I request a temporary halt to hostilities. Morrison looked around his bridge at his surprised crew. Okay, any particular reason? I need to understand something. How did you know where our weapon would fire? You told us, Morrison replied matter-of-factly. I told you. You announced that you were targeting our original position and that the weapon would fire in exactly 2 hours, so we moved. Korath was quiet for a moment, processing this information. But that disrupts the sacred ceremony. I'm sure it does, but we didn't know we were supposed to stay still while you charged your weapon. It is written in the ancient laws of honorable combat. Morrison shrugged. We don't have ancient laws of honorable combat. We just try not to get shot. This simple statement seemed to hit Korath like a physical blow. No ancient laws? No sacred traditions? No honor codes? Not really. We have some basic rules about not shooting surrendering enemies and treating prisoners well, but mostly we just try to win with the least amount of casualties on both sides. Captain Vex, who had been listening to this conversation with growing fascination, stepped forward. Sir, may I speak with the human commander? Korath nodded absently, still trying to understand a military philosophy that had no ceremonies. Human captain, Vex said. I am Captain Vex of the Imperial Navy. I have studied your tactics. And I must ask, do you always fight without formal battle protocols? Pretty much, Morrison replied. We adapt to whatever situation we're facing. But how do you coordinate your attacks without following established patterns? We talk to each other. Each ship captain makes decisions based on what they can see and what needs to be done. This concept was revolutionary to the Empire officers. Their entire military system was based on following ancient patterns and predetermined formations. And you don't perform any ceremonies before battle? Vex asked. We might say a quick prayer or wish each other luck, but that's about it. Admiral Wright's voice joined the conversation from her command ship. Captain Vex, if I may interrupt. I'm Admiral Wright of the Earth Defense Force. I've been observing your fleet, and I have a question for you. Yes, Admiral. Do you actually want to fight us, or are you just following orders? The question caught Vex completely off guard. In the Empire, wanting to fight was irrelevant. Orders were orders, and ancient traditions dictated everything. I'm not sure how to answer that, he said honestly. Let me put it another way, Wright continued. What started this war? Captain Morrison answered. We laughed at Admiral Zefix's speeches because they sounded funny to us. We didn't mean to insult anyone. Fleet Admiral Korath suddenly spoke up. You were mocking our sacred traditions. No, Morrison said firmly. We were reacting to something. That struck us as amusing. Where we come from, when something is funny, we laugh. It's just human nature. But laughter during a formal declaration of war is deeply disrespectful. Maybe in your culture, but not in ours. We laugh when we're happy, when we're nervous, when something surprises us, and yes, when something sounds funny to us. Captain Vex looked thoughtful. So your laughter was not intended as mockery? Not at all. We just have different ways of expressing ourselves. Admiral Wright seized the moment. Captain Vex, Admiral Korath, I think we have a communication problem, not a real conflict. Would you be willing to discuss this calmly instead of shooting at each other? Before Korath could answer, alarms began blaring throughout both fleets. Amy Foster looked up from her sensor station with alarm. Captain, I'm detecting multiple ships approaching fast. They're not broadcasting any identification signals. Captain Vex checked his own sensors and paled. Pirates. A large raiding fleet moving in from the outer system. How many? Morrison asked. At least 100 ships? They're heading straight for us. Admiral Wright made a quick decision. Admiral Korath, I propose a temporary alliance. We can settle our differences later, but right now we have a common enemy. Korath looked at his tactical display, then at the human ships that had been systematically disabling his fleet. A strange thought occurred to him. Admiral Wright, would your ships be willing to fight alongside ours? Of course. But I should warn you, we don't know any of your battle formations. Perhaps, Captain Vex said quietly, that might be an advantage. For the first time since the war began, Fleet Admiral Korath smiled. Captain Vex, signal all ships to follow the human vessel's lead. No formations, no ceremonies, no protocols, just fight. As the pirate fleet approached, something unprecedented happened in the history of the Galactic Empire. For the first time in thousands of years, Imperial ships abandoned their ancient battle traditions and simply tried to win. The result was spectacular. Working together, the human and Empire ships tore through the pirate fleet like a hot knife through butter. The pirates, who had expected to find either humans or Empire ships fighting each other, found themselves facing a coordinated force unlike anything they had ever encountered. The battle was over in less than an hour. The surviving pirates fled, leaving behind dozens of destroyed ships and a very confused fleet of human and alien vessels dot as the last pirate ship disappeared into hyperspace. Admiral Wright opened a channel to the entire combined fleet. All ships, human and Empire, excellent work. Admiral Korath, Captain Vex, I think we need to have a longer conversation about our future relationship. Captain Morrison leaned back in his command chair and smiled. You know what the funny thing is? What's that, sir?